Me in a Neverland. Now, if you add a stage mode on top of the Sharingan, oh boy, you end up with... Alright, so a question I'm sure many of us have been wondering is what would have happened to Naruto if he had a dojutsu? Now, in this video, I'm primarily going to be covering the Sharingan, but depending if you guys want to or not, I can discuss what would have happened if he had the other dojutsus, including, you know, the Rinnegan, Byakugan, etc. There's a few factors I need to clarify before I kind of jump into this. It's primarily that I'm not doing what if he was an Uchiha, because that's a different video in and of itself. I'm just covering if he had a dojutsu, what would have happened. Now, we're gonna give him one Sharingan. It would make the most sense, and especially later on, we find out that the Sharingan, especially for a kid, it drains your chakra a lot. Kakashi only had one, and it drained his chakra. Even though he was already a Jonin, and he's already had it for years and years, it was still very draining for him to use. So I feel like having two Sharingan as a kid is just completely overwhelming, especially if he's not an Uchiha. But he will eventually do better with it than Kakashi did, and the reason why is because Kakashi even states that Naruto, as a kid, has larger chakra reserves than he does, just naturally, because he's an Uzumaki. That's kind of their whole thing. And on top of that, he has the Nine Tails chakra as well. As for the reason why it was implanted at birth, we can assume that it could have perhaps been seen as a hopeful treaty between the Uchiha and the Leaf by donating a Sharingan. Obviously, we know that they had some high tensions. They were planning on rebelling, but that was much later on. Sasuke and Naruto are kids. This is before when Naruto was born. We could assume that before it got to that point, that they could have used this as a hope for a peace treaty by giving Naruto a Sharingan, right? And potentially his rivalry with Sasuke will get even greater, because later on, we know that they have obviously the rivalry, but especially when we get to like the Valley of the End, I can kind of see Sasuke getting pretty upset at Naruto for having a Sharingan when he's not part of the clan, and he doesn't deserve that Dojutsu. Like, people from his clan all died, and Naruto has one of their eyes, you know what I mean? I feel like that would kind of get Sasuke kind of fired up later on. But let's start with the beginning. Let's kind of progress and see what would have happened step by step, because in the end, things start getting a little bit weird, so it's best to start from the beginning, right? First of all, let's just take the time to appreciate how screwed Mizuki would be in that scenario where Naruto made like 1,000 clones. Now give them all one Sharingan. Like, he's absolutely screwed. Now, due to the fact that he has a Sharingan, especially later on, he's going to be taken more seriously by his fellow Academy members and Genin, because the Sharingan is no joke. We obviously know that he wasn't the best as a Genin, and that probably would have helped him with some things. This would have been a perfect moment for Kakashi, because Kakashi knows exactly what Naruto is going through, because he had it as a kid as well, and he's also not an Uchiha. Now, the first fight with Zabuza would have little to no impact on how the fight would have went. The second fight would have went similar, and we know that Naruto's still dumb, so he's still gonna get into Haku's jutsu with the ice mirrors, and he, like Sasuke, who had a Sharingan, would be able to see the individual needles, but wouldn't be able to react to them, because Sasuke seems to be physically superior. He's more seen as a prodigy than Naruto. And that was without using a Sharingan. Naruto would still have to enter his, I believe it was the one-tailed form, in order to defeat Haku. Now, moving on to the Chunin exams. First of all, I don't really think Naruto would be smart enough to cheat on the exam like Sasuke did. I still think he would have done that like original speech that caused most of them to, you know, pass. Moving on, we have the fight with Kiba. If Naruto can defeat Kiba without using a Rasengan and while barely using Takno Jutsu, him with a Sharingan would absolutely destroy Kiba. It would not even be close. After that, Naruto fights Neji. Obviously, Naruto beats Neji initially, but this time he's going to beat him with even less difficulty. We move on to the fight with Kimimaro, where Naruto absolutely gets blitzed. I honestly don't think that Naruto would get blitzed at this point, because if you remember, when Sasuke saw Rock Lee's taijutsu, he managed to train and condition himself, and he used his Sharingan to be able to replicate Rock Lee's taijutsu and physical prowess that he took many, many years to obtain. That's why they were kind of salty when they saw that Sasuke was copying Lee's moves and he was so fast. I feel like something similar could have happened with Naruto as well, because Kakashi taught that to Sasuke on purpose, because he knew he had Sharingan. If Naruto had it as well, he could have done something very similar, and due to his speed, I don't think he would have necessarily got blitzed by Kimimaro, but he would have still left to go recover Sasuke. And we have the first fight in the Valley of the End. Initially, they're both fighting before they enter their charged up states. They would both be fighting with Sharingan, and thus their taijutsu would be a little bit more on par. Naruto would be pressuring Sasuke more than he was before, but ultimately Sasuke is still going to enter his curse mark form, and Naruto's going to enter his QB form. Originally, Naruto was completely knocked knocked out after the fight and Sasuke just kind of left, implying that he was a little bit stronger. But given that Naruto also has a Sharingan, I kind of don't really see that happening the same way. It would kind of be like their second fight later on in the series, if you remember, where they were both kind of conscious but beat up. I think it would be kind of like that, but obviously for the story to progress, Sasuke is still going to have to leave. Now, when we begin entering Shippuden is where things start progressing more and more, because up to this point, things haven't really been too crazy with Naruto's Sharingan. Obviously, he's a Genin, and in part 1, he's like 12 years old. Like, there's not really much that could have changed, but in Shippuden, we have a few instances here and there which kind of change the story later on. First of all, when Deidara and Sasori have Gaara's dead body, right, and Naruto is pissed and trying to fight, Deidara ends up escaping with a clay clone, but I feel like with the Sharingan and the visual prowess that he's given with that, I feel like he would have been able to see through that and attack the actual Deidara before that happened and potentially kill him, because you see that he was entering the tailed beast states, and obviously Deidara's not going to compete with the Nine Tails, so I feel like Deidara could have potentially died in that situation. And then after that, later on, Naruto defeats Kakazu without any of Kakashi's help, because he used the Rasen Shuriken, but it didn't actually finish the job. Now, I know a lot of people have been wondering, when is he going to get the Mangekyo Sharingan? Like, what instance? At what point? A lot of people might think that he might have gotten it when he was a kid, because of all of, like, the loneliness and whatever, and being treated bad by people, the emotional stress could have triggered the Mangekyo Sharingan, but I don't think that would have happened, and it kind of works out timing-wise, too, would be when Jiraiya dies. This is the perfect time for Naruto to obtain the Mangekyo Sharingan. Now, we don't exactly know what his abilities would be. We know what they can't be, and we can kind of have an idea based on other Mangekyo Sharingan abilities. He wouldn't be able to use Kamui because that's Obito's. The only reason that Kakashi could use it is because he had Obito's eyes. He wouldn't be able to use Amaterasu because even though Itachi and Sasuke both use it, Sasuke had Itachi's eyes implanted into him. It is safe to assume that he could potentially have a powerful genjutsu, because that's a lot of what the Sharingan is about, like casting genjutsus such as Itachi's Tsukuyomi and Shisui's Koto wa Matsukami. Like, those are some of the overlapping similarities that we see between the Mangekyo Sharingan of different people. Besides that, the other abilities kind of differ wildly, and it could potentially even be on, obviously, like I said, the scale of Koto wa Matsukami and Tsukuyomi. We move on to the Pain fight. Obviously, he got the Mangekyo Sharingan because Pain killed Jiraiya. Now, if you add a stage mode on top of the Sharingan, oh boy, you end up with some crazy stuff. First of all, Fugasaku probably wouldn't die in Pain's assault. Naruto probably wouldn't get pinned down like he was before by Pain, which means that we wouldn't have that awesome moment with Hinata, which caused him to blow up. But if the Mangekyo and Sage Mode stacked on top of it wasn't enough by some miracle, he would obviously still have the tailed states to go through. So yeah, Pain does not stand any chance whatsoever, and he potentially wouldn't even have to use his Nine-Tails chakra. And later on, you remember that scene with reanimated Itachi and Nagato? We see that the reason that Itachi's able to escape his reanimation is that he still had the crow with Shisui's eye in it, and he freed himself and destroyed it immediately. Here's a thought. Now that Naruto has the Mangekyo Sharingan, first of all, Itachi destroyed the crow with the Mangekyo Sharingan of Shisui because he was afraid that it was too powerful and it would fall into the wrong hands. At this point, he would see that Naruto has a Mangekyo Sharingan, and if Naruto keeps using it, he's going to lose the light in that eye too. Now, we have two very different paths that could go here. First of all, both paths I see Itachi giving it to Naruto because he's going to eventually possibly lose the light to his eyes, and he's going to be a big help against Kabuto, Madara, Obito, and all that stuff. Now, the first scenario is obviously if Naruto implants it into his Sharingan eye that has the Mangekyo Sharingan, so he doesn't lose the light and could potentially get EMS. I know, a lot of you know that it needs to be somebody that's related to you in order for you to get the EMS, but we have not really seen too many instances of somebody getting the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, so it's possible that he still might be able to get EMS without being related to Shisui. But if he goes the other way, which you could say he goes the other way because obviously he's not related to Shisui, so if that doesn't work out, he could implant it into his good eye. And this is going to change things even more drastically because this is going to give him the ability of Susanoo later on. With two Mangekyo Sharingan, they may not be matching, which is going to be kind of interesting. Two non-matching Sharingan, but he would still have the ability to have Susanoo. And either way, he would still have Koto Matsukami. So if his Genjutsu ability is not strong as it is, then it's going to get even stronger. And we see in the show that one of Naruto's weak points is Genjutsu, because he can't cast it for his life. If he were to cast it, he would have to use Ma and Pa on his shoulders and cast the sound Genjutsu that Jiraiya cast. But this is on a whole another level. This is like past Tsukuyomi level of Genjutsu that Naruto now has the ability to use on top of everything that he had before. Now, moving on from this point, the third Raikage gets wrecked by Naruto's clone, even more so. Again, like we said before, if he decides to replace his Sharingan with a new Sharingan and fight against Madara and Obito, things wouldn't really have changed too much because he wouldn't have access to the Susanoo, and he would only have access to Kotoa Matsukami, in which case he could potentially use on them, and we know that is a super strong genjutsu, but I don't think Kotoa Matsukami would work on Obito and Madara, primarily because they're two above Kage level Uchihas who have a wide array of knowledge of the Uchiha clan, and they probably would know how to avoid it or to break free of it with two such powerful opponents. But if we go the other route, like we said, might even be more likely to happen, Naruto would have an armored Susanoo Nine Tails avatar at all times. We see that he gets this a couple of times when he fights with Sasuke, but imagine him doing that on his own. He's just going to be even more powerful, maybe even twice as strong, because we can see that Sasuke's Susanoo can fight on par with Naruto's avatar, so he can potentially even be twice as strong. Now, keeping this in mind, I feel like the following fights would have gone by much faster. Obviously, in order for him to still obtain Hagoromo and Hamura chakra to continue with the rest of the story without extreme alterations, Madara and Obito would still have to progress to the state where they awaken Kaguya, right? But now we are talking about a Naruto with Sage Mode, with the Nine Tails, with Hagoromo's DNA, and with Dual Mangekyo Sharingan. This is just insane. Like, there's no possible way that he would get beaten. I mean, obviously, we see Kaguya still giving it to Naruto and Sasuke, but that fight would have also finished faster with the DMS Naruto, because we saw how strong DMS made Kakashi. Now imagine Naruto, like, just no comparison here. So obviously Kaguya would have gotten defeated like before. The in-between moments probably would have been very similar, but now we reach the Valley of the End the second time. What would have happened during this fight? Because now we have an extremely buffed Naruto and a semi-buffed Sasuke. Before, they were pretty much equal, and they were able to finish the fight destroying each other's arm during the clash between the Chidori and the Rasengan, but it is logical to conclude that Naruto would have taken the dub on this one. Now, it still might have ended similarly, with them both kind of beat up, and Sasuke kind of giving in and becoming, this is kind of the start of when he becomes a good guy. That could have still happened, but I feel like this time it's more likely that Naruto would have blatantly beaten Sasuke. The only possibility where I can see Sasuke actually recovering from this is if the fact that Naruto has 2 DMS, he either starts losing light or starts getting his chakra drained even faster. Because we can see towards the end of the fight he had like no chakra originally, but if you have the Sharingan draining his chakra on top of that, then Sasuke could potentially overcome Naruto. But that probably wouldn't happen because obviously he would have the Asura Nine Tails looking avatar with the Susanoo on top of it. I don't think Sasuke would really stand a chance in this one, and Naruto would take the dub. Sasuke would still become good, and we progress to the last and what happens in Boruto, but I'm not going to talk about that one in this video. I'm going to save that one for a different one. If you guys want to know what happens later, just let me know. Also, if you guys want me to continue with these dojutsu videos, if you had a Byakugan, Rinnegan, etc. If you guys like more videos like this, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to check out that sick anime hoodie. I'm going to leave it down in the description, and I'll catch you in the next one.